Meadow Lane in suburban Pittsburgh looked, at first glance, like the picture of serenity. Its gently curving streets were lined with neatly trimmed hedges and matching mailboxes, each painted in approved shades of cream or charcoal. Set behind the regulation height fences were single-family homes, many featuring pastel siding and manicured lawns. On weekends, retirees mulched their flower beds while young families chalked hopscotch patterns on the sidewalks. It was the kind of neighborhood realtors praised for its pride of ownership. However, beneath that harmonious exterior lay a potent force, the Meadow Lane Homeowners Association, or HOA. Officially, the HOA existed to maintain property values and ensure consistency. Unofficially, its day-to-day operations often hinged on the whims of a single board member, Belinda Martell, though nearly everyone referred to her behind closed doors as Karen. Belinda, Karen, had settled into Meadow Lane 5 years earlier, swiftly muscling her way onto the HOA board. She was in her early 50s, with short, meticulously styled hair and a penchant for crisp pastel blouses. Her manner exuded a paradoxical mix of prying curiosity and aloof superiority. If a newcomer planted shrubs that deviated from the standard palette by even a shade, Karen was quick to deliver a typed note citing Article 3, Section 4, approved foliage. If a longtime resident dared hang wind chimes, she produced a condescending email about noise pollution. To her, the HOA's thick binder of rules was both shield and spear, enabling her to enforce her personal vision of Meadow Lane's proper look. Many neighbors found Karen's approach irksome but tolerable. They saw her petty edicts as the price for living in a safe, well-groomed place. Yet some quietly bristled under her watchful eye. They disliked how she singled out trifles, like lawn flamingos or a shed an inch over regulation height, for stern lectures or threats of fines. Over time, they learned to keep their minor rule infractions hidden, hoping to avoid her wrath. The illusions of perfect lawns and color-coordinated shutters masked an underlying tension. No one wanted to become Karen's next target. But for many months, the typical friction remained mild. Karen scolded about trash cans left out too long, or front yards with excess potted plants. Neighbors grumbled yet complied. The balance, tenuous though it was, held steady. Everything changed when a new couple arrived, one of whom managed type 1 diabetes and needed quick, convenient access to medication. In their quiet attempt to make life easier, they unwittingly triggered Karen's full-blown hostility, leading to one of the most dramatic showdowns in Meadow Lane's history. At first, no one suspected that the sight of a small mini-fridge on a corner of the couple's patio would spark such controversy. On a street full of standard barbecue grills and neatly stacked patio chairs, a discreet appliance seemed harmless enough. But Karen's obsession with uniform aesthetics and her unbending nature would transform a simple fridge into a flashpoint for conflict. Little did she realize that her campaign to banish the ugly contraption would inspire neighbors to rally in defense of compassion, culminating in a radical, solar-powered solution that would outmaneuver her meddling and reshape the entire community's spirit. The new residents were James and Emily Morrison, a married couple in their 30s who moved to Meadow Lane seeking a calm environment. James, a computer programmer, had lived with type 1 diabetes since childhood. He required insulin injections multiple times a day, alongside a careful routine of frequent blood sugar checks and quick carbohydrate snacks if his glucose dipped too low. While many diabetics simply carried supplies inside, James had a unique predicament. His home office was a converted den at the rear of the house, near a private exit onto the patio. For convenience, he wanted a small fridge on the patio to store insulin vials, backup glucose drinks, and other quick remedies. Emily was fully supportive. She suggested a compact mini fridge, no taller than a bedside table, placed against the patio's far corner. They made sure it had a neutral gray finish, hopefully blending with the siding. They reasoned that it would hardly be an eyesore, especially if partially concealed behind a potted fern. They'd been open about this plan with their immediate next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gallagher, who found it sensible. In fact, Mrs. Gallagher even joked, "Less insulin to lug around. How convenient. Plus, I might pop by for a cold soda." No one foresaw an uproar. Once the fridge was delivered, James and Emily carefully set it up. Tucking it behind the patio love seat, they tested its operation verifying it stayed at the right temperature for insulin. Satisfied, they returned inside, believing they'd resolved a small, everyday challenge. Meanwhile, the rest of Meadow Lane's residents carried on with their routines, mowing lawns, walking dogs, hosting barbecues. For a short time, life seemed ordinary, punctuated only by the hum of the new fridge that might go unnoticed by passers-by. Enter Karen. One afternoon, on her typical stroll with phone in hand, ostensibly for documentation of any code violations, she spotted a faint reflection of metal behind James and Emily's patio chairs. Curious, she leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Her expression morphed into distaste upon recognizing it was an appliance, a mini-fridge, no less. The binder of HOA rules in her mind instantly flashed. No external appliances visible from neighboring properties. In truth, the bylaws contained no explicit mention of small fridges, but Karen's interpretation was broad. She believed that any non-approved furniture or fixture was a threat to the neighborhood's consistent look. That evening, Karen typed a crisp letter addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, referencing Section 8, Clause 5 of the Meadow Lane Guidelines, which forbade unapproved exterior fixtures. She demanded the immediate removal of the fridge, scolding them for disregarding the established aesthetic. She also wrote a separate note to the HOA board, recommending an official fine. Satisfied, she slid these messages into the Morrisons' mailbox, anticipating compliance. When James found the letter, frustration welled up. He'd read about Meadow Lane's strict rules, but never expected pushback over something so personal and medically necessary. After all, an outdoor fridge was no more obtrusive than a grill or a storage container. Emily tried to calm him, urging a polite response. They drafted an explanation about James's diabetes and how the fridge was a small but vital convenience. They politely requested an exemption, offering to enclose the fridge with a tasteful wooden screen or some camouflage to meet aesthetic standards. They hoped reason would prevail. But soon, they'd discover that dealing with Karen was never that simple. Her zeal for enforcement overshadowed empathy for medical needs, and she was prepared to escalate the matter to the full board if the Morrisons didn't capitulate. The stage was set for an intense standoff, one that would reveal Karen's refusal to compromise and the broader community's capacity for compassion. A few days later, as James arrived home from a routine medical appointment, he found Karen waiting on the sidewalk, arms folded. She wore a short-sleeved blouse in pastel green, her phone poised as if ready to take photos. He braced himself, stepping out of his car, insulin kit slung over one shoulder. Karen approached with brisk steps. "Mr. Morrison," she began, her tone crisp. "I left a letter in your mailbox. You haven't responded in writing. Are you aware that the mini-fridge remains on your patio, visible from the street?" James forced a polite smile. "I did see your letter, Ms. Martell. We also replied, explaining the medical reason for the fridge. If it's about appearance, we're happy to add a screen. It's quite small and not an eyesore. I need quick access to insulin." Karen's lips tightened. Be that as it may, the HOA guidelines are clear. No external appliances or fixtures can stand in the open without board approval. We've set these standards to maintain the uniform character of Meadow Lane. A fridge is not standard patio furniture. James gripped his bag, heart pounding with frustration. "Karen, I'm diabetic. My insulin is temperature sensitive. This is about health. The fridge is discreet. I can't see how it disrupts the neighborhood's appearance." She gestured curtly. "Perhaps you can keep the insulin inside your kitchen? Or get a cooler you carry with you. The outside fridge is unacceptable. Remove it, or face a formal violation notice. I'm giving you another 48 hours. James pressed his lips together, resisting the urge to argue. He felt the weight of her unwavering stare, realizing that logic wouldn't easily sway her. Instead, he nodded stiffly. "I'll speak with the board. We'll see about an exemption." Karen gave a taut smile, pivoted, and marched away, phone in hand. James watched her retreat, anger simmering. He exhaled, reminding himself to remain calm. Emily met him at the door, having observed from the window. "We're not giving up, right?" she asked, voice tremulous. "You shouldn't have to disrupt your routine or risk your health because she calls it ugly." He shook his head. "Of course not. We'll fight this if we must. The board needs to hear us out." That evening, James wrote a more formal letter to the HOA board, detailing his medical condition and the practicality of the outdoor fridge. He included photos showing how unobtrusive it was, partially shielded by planters. He also offered potential solutions, like installing a wooden enclosure or moving the fridge to an even less visible angle. All he needed was official permission to keep it. He believed reason would prevail. Why would an HOA penalize a man for managing diabetes? But unbeknownst to him, Karen was already lobbying behind the scenes, painting the fridge as a dangerous precedent. She claimed that if the board allowed one unsightly appliance, soon people might store old freezers, washers, or random junk outside. Her calls and emails bombarded board members, pressuring them to uphold the no external fixture principle. "We mustn't let sentimentality override the rules," she'd say. For the moment, the board was divided. Some were sympathetic, while others worried about uniform standards. The conflict, still simmering, threatened to boil over into a formal hearing. Meanwhile, rumors swirled through the neighborhood. Some residents, learning that James's fridge served a medical purpose, were outraged that Karen gave him grief. Others, either intimidated by or loyal to Karen, muttered about keeping the property classy. No one remained truly neutral, as the fridge saga symbolized a broader debate. When does a community's pursuit of uniformity overshadow compassion for neighbors' needs? A week later, the HOA board convened its monthly meeting in the Meadow Lane Community Hall, a modest space with folding chairs, pale beige walls, and a podium. Usually, these sessions drew a small crowd of retirees or those with pressing concerns about landscaping or security. This time, word of the fridge dispute circulated widely, attracting more attendees, eager to see how it would unfold. James arrived early, dressed in a collared shirt, projecting calm determination. Emily accompanied him for moral support, holding a folder of documents, medical letters verifying James's diabetes management, photos of the mini fridge, and the suggestions they'd proposed for aesthetic enclosures. They took seats near the front, exchanging nervous smiles. Soon, the board took their places, 5 members behind a table labeled with nameplates. At the center sat Bruce Daniels, the HOA president, a retired lawyer known for even-handed judgments. To his right, the vice president, secretary, and treasurer. On the far left, wearing a pastel blouse and a thin smile, Karen, the neighborhood standards liaison. She gazed around, spotting James with a slight arch of her brow. After typical housekeeping items, approval of minutes, a minor discussion about holiday decor, Bruce introduced the main contested topic, external appliance complaint on Redwood Drive. Redwood was James's street. The hush fell as he explained that a homeowner had installed a small fridge on their patio for medical reasons, and a complaint was filed about rule violations. He invited James to speak. James rose, voice steady but tinged with emotion. He outlined his medical condition, emphasizing how unpredictable insulin needs can be. "I do have a fridge inside," he acknowledged, "but sometimes, especially when I'm working or out on the patio, I need to act fast. A single delay in retrieving insulin or a snack might mean a serious hypoglycemic episode. The mini fridge is small, discreet, and half hidden by planters. We're open to suggestions on how to camouflage it further." He handed the board copies of pictures. The device was indeed quite compact, overshadowed by the patio furniture. He also showed a doctor's note verifying the importance of quick access to insulin. The note mentioned James's history of occasional severe lows, stating that small modifications to living space can be crucial. "I'm not asking for special treatment just for convenience," James said, looking each board member in the eye. "This is about health, and possibly life or death in extreme scenarios." Several neighbors in attendance nodded supportively. One man, Mr. Flores, stood and said, "James is my neighbor, and I hardly noticed the fridge. It's not an eyesore. He's offered to screen it. Please, let's be compassionate." Applause broke out from a portion of the audience. Then Karen cleared her throat, requesting to respond. Bruce allowed her. She stood, clasping her hands. "We all sympathize with medical needs," she began. "But we also have established rules. If we permit an external fridge, what stops the next person from installing a large freezer? Or an old fridge with peeling paint? We risk a slippery slope. Our guidelines keep Meadow Lane uniform. Let's not open the door to unsanctioned appliances that degrade our property values." Murmurs of disapproval rippled. Still, Karen pressed on. We have no guarantee this device won't leak, rust, or attract pests. The board must uphold standards for everyone's benefit. Mr. Morrison can keep his insulin in a cooler or inside. Why must we all endure a glaring appliance on a patio? She shot James a thin-lipped look, as though delivering a final blow of logic. Bruce Daniels asked for calm, acknowledging both sides. A discussion ensued among board members. Some repeated Karen's fear of setting a precedent. Others, led by a pragmatic board member named Carol Kim, suggested a tailored solution. We can grant a conditional variance, an exception that's valid only if the fridge remains properly maintained, well-screened, and used exclusively for medical supplies. That ensures we're not letting everyone put random appliances on patios. Hope flared in James's eyes, while Karen's expression soured. The board resolved to schedule a site visit in 2 days to see the fridge and discuss possible enclosures. They'd vote on the variance afterward. The meeting adjourned with a sense of cautious optimism for James and obvious frustration from Karen. As the crowd dispersed, a cluster of neighbors offered James pats on the shoulder, murmuring, "Don't worry, we're behind you." The seeds of solidarity were taking root. Little did Karen realize that the more she insisted on the fridge's removal, the more the community's empathy would blossom, ultimately fueling a creative plan to outmaneuver her. The next day, word spread about James's predicament. A flurry of text messages, phone calls, and sidewalk chats revealed that many neighbors felt outraged by Karen's cold stance. They recognized that a diabetic's need for immediate medication was no trivial matter. Some older residents recalled times they or their loved ones struggled with chronic conditions. Others with children empathized deeply. Health took priority over a uniform aesthetic. Sensing this shared concern, a small group convened informally at the home of Rebecca Lynn, a retired nurse who admired James and Emily's kindness. Over cups of tea, they brainstormed ways to defend James's fridge. Mr. Flores, the neighbor who'd spoken at the board meeting, recounted how Karen worried about precedent. Another neighbor, an architect named Jonas Bailey, suggested a custom enclosure that matched the house siding exactly. If she can't see it, maybe she'll let it go, he said. But Rebecca worried Karen would still find fault, claiming it was still an unapproved device. Then, a younger homeowner, Natalie Kim, who happened to be an environmental engineer, hesitated before speaking. What if we transform the fridge into something that's not just an appliance, but a beneficial feature? Something that clearly supports health, uses renewable energy, and remains discreet. She described a concept of building a small solar-powered cooling station that doubled as a bench or a deck box. It could look like normal outdoor furniture. The solar panel, if integrated cleverly, might reduce wires or visible cords. That might quell the eyesore complaint. And with the HOA's push for green solutions, we might get them on board. Excitement sparked. Jonas and Natalie began sketching. A bench-like structure, large enough to hide a mini fridge inside, with vents ensuring proper airflow. On top, a slim solar panel could power the cooling system, possibly supplemented by a small battery. The outside would be finished in a style matching Meadow Lane's typical bench designs, wooden slats in a neutral stain. The result, from a casual glance, it'd be a tasteful seat or storage box. But inside, it would keep medication chilled, drawing minimal attention. Sure, it was more complicated than buying a standard mini fridge. But in the face of Karen's hostility, the neighbors wanted a solution so subtle, so integrated, that she'd have no grounds to object. Even if she discovered its true function, they could argue it was an approved piece of furniture, with sustainable energy usage aligned to the HOA's guidelines on supporting green initiatives. The notion felt bold, even subversive, but they believed it might just work. Rebecca volunteered to chat with Emily, seeing if James would be open to such an idea. Within hours, Emily texted back enthusiastically. James would love that. He's always up for a tech-savvy, eco-friendly approach. With that green light, the group formed a plan, build a prototype for a discrete solar bench that contained a cooler or mini fridge. If it blended seamlessly, the HOA might see it as a beneficial enhancement rather than a violation. They recognized the biggest challenge would be time. The board's site visit was soon, and the final vote wouldn't wait forever. But a few resourceful neighbors had enough tools and leftover supplies to begin building a simple prototype. They also planned to raise some funds for a small solar panel kit. Mr. Flores joked, We can pass the hat for the Karen-proof fridge project. Laughter rippled, but beneath it lay a serious resolve to defend James's rightful need. And so, a quiet rebellion began, neighbors harnessing creativity to circumvent an arbitrary rule. The friction Karen ignited had galvanized them into forging a solution that was, ironically, more advanced and inconspicuous than a plain old mini-fridge could ever be. Soon, the seeds of a solar revolution in that suburban backyard would sprout, overshadowing Karen's meddling and revealing a deeper community bond than anyone had seen before. On a cool Tuesday afternoon, the HOA board members arrived at the Morrison house for the promised site visit. James greeted them politely, having tidied the patio, adding potted plants around the mini-fridge in an attempt to soften its appearance. Emily offered refreshments. Karen stood at the back of the group, arms crossed, scanning every detail. Bruce Daniels, the HOA president, took the lead in asking questions. James explained again how the fridge functioned, tiny, quiet, with a minimal energy draw. He showed them a mock-up of a wooden screen to cover the front. "If that's acceptable, we can install it right away," he said, forcing a hopeful tone. A couple of board members nodded, expressing that it looked fairly inoffensive. But Karen jumped in, pointing out how the fridge's top was still visible from certain angles. "A simple screen won't hide the fact it's an appliance," she insisted. "And we must consider how this sets a precedent for others to keep external coolers, freezers, or who knows what else. No screen can fully address that." She rattled off more concerns. Potential leaks, rust, noise. The guidelines exist for a reason. Tricia, one of the sympathetic board members, raised an eyebrow, saying, "It's quite small, Ms. Martell. I don't see how it'll produce more noise or risk than, say, a typical AC unit. We allow AC condensers outside, after all." Karen's nostrils flared. AC units are specifically permitted in designated locations. This fridge is not. Let's not conflate the two. We should remain consistent with our well-established policy. No external household appliances. She shot James a sharp look, as though placing blame on him for daring to challenge the status quo. James maintained a measured calm. "This is about health. I rely on insulin multiple times daily. If you think it's about convenience or an aesthetic choice, it's not. Please consider an exception." He gestured to the letter from his doctor, which was still pinned to the fridge door. Bruce Daniels rubbed his temples. "We'll deliberate and see if a variance is possible, like we said at the last meeting. We might require the screen and some conditions about maintenance or limited usage. Let's remain open-minded, folks." Karen clearly seethed, but she nodded stiffly. She suspected that if she didn't push harder, the board might grant the variance. She decided to escalate. That evening, she fired off a mass email to all board members plus many neighbors, claiming the fridge undermines property values, calling it a slippery slope for blight. She included ominous lines. "If we let one mini-fridge in, soon we'll have microwaves, old washers, and more. Let's keep Meadow Lane free from such clutter." The email ignited more debate. Some recipients were unimpressed, seeing it as fear-mongering. Others, unsure, worried that Karen might have a point about non-traditional items. The board's next closed-door session was set for Friday, where they'd presumably vote on whether to issue a violation or grant a special exception. Tension climbed as the day approached. James felt the weight of his medical vulnerability overshadowed by Karen's unyielding posture. Meanwhile, the neighbors quietly constructing the solar bench pressed on, determined to finalize it before the board's decision. If they could present it as a ready-to-install solution, maybe James wouldn't even need a variance. He'd simply have a disguised, solar-powered piece of furniture that satisfied the rules at face value. As the final nails were hammered and the solar panel tested, excitement surged among the little group. The concept seemed to work, a neat bench-like unit that opened to reveal a small, high-efficiency cooler. The integrated solar panel had enough wattage to keep insulin at the desired temperature, possibly supplemented by a small battery that stored excess energy. If they installed this behind James's patio seat, the entire appliance would appear as an innocuous bench, in line with Meadow Lane's typical design. The question, would Karen accept it, or find another reason to meddle? Friday evening arrived, bringing the much-anticipated HOA board session. It took place in a modest conference room at the local library, rather than the usual community hall, giving the proceeding a more formal feel. Chairs were arranged in rows for residents. The board table faced them, nameplates in place, including Karen's. The primary item on the agenda: decision on the Morrison patio fridge, potential variance or violation. James and Emily sat near the front, steeling themselves for whatever outcome emerged. They knew the board might side with Karen's strict interpretation or might grant the variance with conditions. The neighbors who'd collaborated on the secret solar bench also attended, exchanging conspiratorial smiles. They carried photos and a short demonstration video, hoping to present it if given a chance. The meeting began with routine updates. Tension built as they inched toward the main topic. Finally, Bruce Daniels introduced it, summarizing the site visit. He acknowledged James's medical necessity and Karen's concerns about precedent. Then he opened the floor for final comments. Karen wasted no time, launching into a fervent speech about upholding community standards. She insisted that the fridge was clearly outside the norm, and that Meadow Lane risked losing its uniform aesthetic. She conjured images of neighbors piling old appliances in plain view. Disorder creeps in with one exception, then another, she concluded, eyes flashing. After her speech, a hush fell. James rose, carefully reading from notes. He reiterated that his health was at stake, that he'd accept any conditions or screening, that the fridge was modern and silent, unlikely to degrade the environment. Please, he said, I ask for your empathy and a bit of reason. I can't see how a small device on my private patio, largely hidden, threatens property values. Some audience members applauded softly. At that moment, Natalie Kim stood up from the crowd, requesting permission to address the board. Bruce allowed it. Natalie cleared her throat. I respect the board's desire to keep Meadow Lane looking neat. So, some of us neighbors collaborated on an alternative. We've built a solar-powered bench that discreetly houses a compact cooler. It's tasteful, invisible as an appliance. Let me show you photos. She held up printed images, passing copies to the board. The bench looked sleek, wooden slats in a neutral finish, a slight overhang concealing a small solar panel. Gasps and murmurs spread. Karen's brow furrowed in confusion. Natalie continued, the cooler inside is for insulin or medication. The unit draws power from the sun, so no trailing cords. Externally, it's just an attractive bench that can be placed on the patio. If the board is worried about an outdoor fridge, maybe they'll approve this furniture piece, because at a glance, it's no different than a wooden deck box. We meet aesthetic guidelines, it's eco-friendly, and it solves James's medical need. No slippery slope of old washers or anything. Excitement rippled. Another neighbor chimed in. Yes, we tested it. The internal temperature remains stable. It's ideal for medication. The board members flipped through the photos, intrigued. Carol Kim, the board member, openly praised the idea. This addresses the main concerns about appearances and cords. Bruce Daniels nodded thoughtfully, looking impressed. If this fits existing guidelines for patio furniture, we might not even need a variance. It's basically a bench, correct? Karen, sensing her authority slipping, interjected. Hold on. This is still an appliance, just hidden. We shouldn't be fooled by a wooden facade. The principle remains the same, an external cooler. She tried to sound firm, but the room's energy had shifted. People saw the solar bench as a clever, low-impact solution. One board member even smiled, remarking, this is actually quite innovative. Our rules support eco-friendly additions, after all. A lively debate ensued. Karen tried to find new angles. Could the solar panel reflect glare? Might the hidden cooler degrade? But each question was answered. The panel was low glare. The cooler was well sealed and vented. In the end, Bruce proposed a vote. Should we authorize the Morrisons to replace their visible mini-fridge with this disguised solar bench solution, thus resolving the dispute? The board voted. With minimal hesitation, for members voted yes. Only Karen opposed. The motion passed. Applause burst from the audience. James, Emily, and their inventive neighbors exchanged triumphant grins. They'd not only found acceptance for James's medication needs, but had done so in a way that aligned perfectly with the HOA-style rules. For once, Karen's unwavering negativity had been outmaneuvered by community ingenuity. As the meeting adjourned, Karen sat stiff, clearly displeased. Residents chatted excitedly, praising the bench design as a model of compromise. The Morrisons thanked everyone who contributed. Natalie said quietly, We'll help you install it soon, within the week. Then no one can complain about an unsightly fridge. James smiled, gratitude shining in his eyes. In that moment, compassion and creativity had prevailed over Karen's obstinate enforcement, setting the stage for a final transformation on Meadow Lane. Over the next few days, the neighborly collaboration turned into a flurry of finishing touches on the solar-powered bench. Natalie Kim double-checked the solar wiring, ensuring the small panel fed into a compact battery pack hidden under the seat. Jonas Bailey refined the wooden frame, sanding and staining the slats so they matched the neutral gray palette typical of Meadow Lane's outdoor furniture. Mr. Flores added a discreet vent panel near the back, ensuring the cooler wouldn't overheat. At the Morrison household, James cleared a space on the patio where the old mini-fridge sat. He and Emily had unplugged it, moving it inside temporarily. They eagerly awaited the final bench arrival. Each passing day, James struggled slightly with carrying insulin from the main fridge or using a portable cooler, but the knowledge that a permanent solution was on its way sustained him. Karen, meanwhile, lurked in the background, presumably hoping to catch some violation during the bench's construction. But all of it took place in neighbors' garages or backyards. There was nothing for her to photograph or complain about. In a half-hearted attempt, she emailed Bruce Daniels, demanding to see proof of safe design. Bruce replied that the board had already approved the concept, trusting the neighbors to comply with standard building practices. No code infraction was found. Finally, on a sunny Saturday morning, a small team gathered at James's patio for the official installation. They carried the bench in sections, carefully assembling it in place. The structure spanned about 4 feet in length, 18 inches deep, and nearly 2 feet high, large enough to house a cooler but sized like typical deck seating. The top opened on hinges to reveal the cooler beneath, complete with modest foam insulation. The solar panel was integrated into the bench's backrest, angled upward to catch sunlight. Wires ran neatly to a concealed battery compartment. Watching the process, James felt a wave of relief. Once complete, Jonas tested the temperature control system, verifying the cooler chilled properly. The bench lid closed smoothly, leaving no visible sign of the electronics inside. From the outside, it looked like a tasteful wooden seat, maybe a reading nook or extra seating for gatherings. Emily marveled. It's better than we imagined. It's actually kind of stylish. They flicked on the small digital thermometer inside, which displayed a stable range suitable for insulin. James placed a few vials in there, plus a small container of emergency glucose gel. The volunteers cheered lightly as the system hummed gently to life. Solar energy for your medication. Who knew? Mr. Flores joked, snapping a photo with his phone. Before leaving, they arranged a few potted plants around the bench, just for extra decorative flair. The end result was a well-integrated piece of furniture that neither clashed with the house's exterior nor blocked the walkway. More importantly, it fully satisfied James's medical need. He could step onto the patio, lift the bench's lid, and retrieve his insulin in seconds. No rummaging or running across the house. And since it was board-approved, there should be no further obstacles. No official ceremony accompanied the bench's unveiling. Nonetheless, a quiet sense of triumph filled the air. The neighbors parted, returning to their day's tasks, each feeling a measure of satisfaction. Their collective effort had proven that empathy and creativity could circumvent petty rules. That same evening, James tested the bench thoroughly, retrieving snacks and insulin multiple times. It was perfect. He let out a contented sigh, thinking, we did it. Karen can't argue with a bench. Little did he realize that Karen would still attempt one last outburst, though this time, her scathing remarks would fall flat in the face of the bench's undeniable compliance with every single HOA standard. And so, the conflict drew closer to a resolution that would reaffirm the neighborhood's sense of solidarity and compassion, leaving Karen's dogmatic approach overshadowed. Word of the magic bench traveled quickly around Meadow Lane. Curious neighbors strolled by the Morrison patio, peering at the unassuming seat that apparently had a hidden cooler inside. Many were delighted by the ingenuity, praising it as a testament to how an HOA community could adapt rules for real-life needs. Some teased that soon they'd all want solar benches for drinks in summer. Indeed, the bench had become a minor neighborhood sensation. Inevitably, Karen came to see it in person. One drizzly afternoon, she appeared unannounced, stepping carefully onto the patio. She eyed the bench from a few angles, grimacing at the slight glint from the solar panel integrated into the backrest. She rapped on the wood with her knuckles, as if testing for hidden compartments. The outside revealed nothing suspicious. No visible fridge door, no unsightly cables. James, who was inside reviewing code for work, heard the tapping and came out, politely greeting her. Without preamble, Karen demanded, "So this is your new approach, concealing the fridge in a bench?" She glared at him, lips pursed. He nodded calmly. "It's a piece of custom furniture that happens to keep medication cool, yes. Approved by the board. Eco-friendly, minimal footprint." She sniffed. "Are you sure you're not violating some electrical code? This solar panel contraption could be unsafe. Or maybe it's not really a bench, but an appliance in disguise." James pressed his palms together, summoning patience. "It meets building code for small solar kits. The board saw the design. Our neighbors helped ensure it's stable and well-constructed. You can check with Bruce Daniels if you have concerns." She frowned, opening her phone, presumably to snap pictures. The bench looked impeccable, the surrounding decor harmonious. Hardly any vantage revealed it as more than a sturdy seat with a wooden lid. Desperate for an angle, Karen pointed at the backrest. That panel's angle might reflect sunlight into a neighbor's window, causing glare. "Let's see." She repositioned herself, squinting. But the panel was coated with an anti-reflective film, so she found no damning gleam. Next, she leaned close to the bench's sides, searching for a gap or stray wires. The craftsmanship was neat, vents discreetly placed. With each second, her scowl deepened. No easy way to claim a violation. Finally, she straightened, dropping her phone into her purse. "You've certainly gone to lengths to bend the rules," she said coldly. James exhaled slowly. "We found a solution that meets the guidelines and addresses my diabetes. It's not bending the rules, we're following them." Karen's face reddened slightly, but she forced a half smile. "We'll see if the board remains satisfied long-term. If anything changes, if it breaks or looks unsightly, I'll file a complaint." With that, she turned and left, footsteps echoing on the wet patio. James watched her retreat, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. He had no desire for a personal feud, but her hostility left little room for peace. Over the following week, Karen tried rallying the board to revisit the decision. She insisted the bench was still an external fridge. She circulated dire predictions about appliance creep. But the board, having physically inspected the bench, dismissed her arguments as baseless. One board member quipped in an email, "We can't forbid all forms of furniture that might chill beverages. That's not in the bylaws." At last, Karen's crusade fizzled. Her final attempt, an official complaint citing visual disharmony, was overruled by the board, which found the bench matched the home's color scheme and furniture style. Dejected, Karen had no choice but to drop the matter. She retreated to other minor grievances, leaving the solar bench untouched. The quiet triumph of James, Emily, and their supportive neighbors was complete. They'd neutralized the problem with a stealthy, functional design that embraced the very guidelines Karen wielded so rigidly. In the months that followed, Meadow Lane discovered that the mini-fridge incident had fostered a more neighborly atmosphere than anyone could recall. The story of how James's life-sustaining insulin fridge was disguised within a solar-powered bench spread across the block, inspiring casual porch conversations and forging deeper bonds. Residents who once merely nodded politely at each other now recalled the day they hammered nails, tested solar panels, or rummaged in garages for supplies. Compassion for James's medical condition led them to cooperate in ways the standard HOA rules never could. Meanwhile, the bench itself became an emblem of quiet resilience. Whenever James stepped outside to retrieve an insulin vial or a quick snack, he felt reassured that no neighbor would judge him for it. The solar cooler's performance remained stable through warm summer days, garnering occasional jokes that he never had to pay an electric bill for his fridge. Some neighbors even inquired about building their own versions for storing garden seeds or cold drinks, a testament to how an inclusive concept can catch on. As for Karen, her presence in the neighborhood persisted, but somewhat diminished in potency. Though she still pointed out minor transgressions, like an unapproved garden statue or a mailbox that needed repainting, her stance on major issues was less credible now. Residents saw how far she'd pushed to block a medically essential fridge, only to be thwarted by the community's unity. She withdrew from the public spotlight, focusing on smaller tasks that the board rarely contested. She had lost the moral high ground, overshadowed by a solution that was both rule-abiding and hardeningly inventive. One warm Saturday evening, the Morrisons hosted a small barbecue on their patio, inviting the neighbors who had helped with the bench. Burgers sizzled on the grill, children laughed, and adults traded stories while sipping lemonade. At one point, James raised his glass in a quiet toast. "Thank you, everyone. If not for your support, I might have had to keep my meds far away and risk my health. Your kindness made a real difference." Natalie Kim smiled. "We just recognized you had a need, and we had the tools to fix it. It was no big deal." Jonas Bailey nodded. "Sometimes, a challenge is just an opportunity for creativity, right?" They clinked glasses, a collective sense of pride coursing through the group. A short distance away, perched inconspicuously, was the wooden bench with its hidden cooler. The late evening sun caught the edge of the small solar panel, and for a moment, it gleamed gently, an emblem of how empathy and innovation could triumph over dogmatic rules. By nightfall, the glow of porch lights and soft chatter enveloped Meadow Lane. The hush of well-tended lawns suggested an order that Karen so prized, but beneath it lay a deeper, more humane harmony, neighbors looking out for each other. The final resolution to the fridge saga left a lasting imprint, showing that sometimes, doing what's right for a neighbor's well-being might require bending, interpreting, or rethinking the rules. Rather than descending into chaos, the community found itself enriched, forging a path where uniform aesthetics and personal medical needs coexisted gracefully. Thus ended the battle of the patio fridge, with a victory that was larger than any single item. It was a victory for compassion, for creative problem-solving, and for a sense of unity that overcame the narrow viewpoint of a self-appointed gatekeeper. And in that final harmony, the new normal for Meadow Lane, there was an undeniable sense that caring for one another's needs would always outweigh the petty demands of even the most obstinate Karen.